Welcome to Senior Living Marketing Perspectives. I'm Debbie Howard with Senior Living Smart, and today I cannot tell you how excited I am to welcome Nancy Harhut, co-founder and chief creative officer at HBT Marketing. Nancy is the author of a new award-winning book, Using Behavioral Science in Marketing. And getting people to take action is what Nancy is all about. Her specialty is blending best-of-breed creative with behavioral science to prompt response. She and her teams have won over 200 international and national awards for marketing effectiveness. Along the way, she's helped generate $68 million in incremental revenue for Nationwide, established 7 controls for the GM card, and created one of H&R Block's most successful campaigns. Recognized for her work in B2C, B2B, and nonprofit, Nancy's been named one of the 10 most fascinating people in B2B marketing, a social top 50 email marketing leader, and a top 40 digital strategist. A frequent speaker at marketing conferences, she shared her passion with audiences in London, Sydney, Moscow, Madrid, Stockholm, Berlin, Dubai, and all over the US, including several return engagements with South by Southwest, and I do believe a hot sauce and wings eating contest is in there somewhere. So welcome, Nancy. I'm so excited you are here.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. Yes, there was a hot sauce eating conference or a hot sauce eating episode at the Guru conference. So you're absolutely right about that. But thank you for the wonderful introduction. And I am so thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I was fortunate enough to attend Nancy's conference. She's actually been a speaker at the last 2 Smash conferences in Vegas, which is funny because we both live here in Greater Boston, and yet we had to go to Vegas to meet each other. But I remember coming away with that first conference last year with an entire book of notes. I was so excited about everything that Nancy had to share. And when I saw that she was coming back this past year, I was like right in the front row. And I love the title for our listeners. It was something like why prospects do what they do and how to get them to do what you want them to do. And I'm like, that's what we want to do in marketing. We want them to get them to do what we want to do. So Nancy, how do we do that?
So it is a great question, isn't it? And it's always on the minds of people who are in marketing and sales. But honestly, just it's on the minds of people. Like we want our partners to do what we want them to do. We want our kids. We want our colleagues. And the simple answer is to apply a little bit of behavioral science. And so when I say behavioral science, people might be like, oh, I don't know, test tubes, lab coats, like where is she going with this? But it's really just the study of how people behave, or more specifically, how they make decisions. And what behavioral scientists have found is that very often people don't make decisions the way we in sales and marketing like to think they do, right? We like to think that they make these well thought out, considered decisions. And if we got to put the right information in front of the right person at the right time, they'll make the right decision. But that's not entirely true. Very often there are other factors at play that influence people's decisions. And a lot of times they're not even aware of them. We think we know why we're doing what we're doing, but very often we're responding to something else, right? Humans over the ages have evolved to conserve mental energy, right? We don't like to exert a lot of mental energy. And as a result, we've developed these automatic, instinctive, hardwired behaviors. So when marketing and salespeople know about that and discover how to prompt or trigger these automatic behaviors, it increases the likelihood that people will do what we want them to do.
And I think I recall from your session, it's counterintuitive. We think we educate people first. It's an intellectual, linear kind of checklist decision, especially in senior living where it's the adult child often making the decision on behalf of a loved one, a parent. And so they're doing their due diligence and they're having this intellectual experience. And yet you say really it's emotion first. And then it's backed up by the research. So we're just trying. Can you talk a little bit about how that works?
Sure, sure. And you're absolutely right. We think that people are making these decisions, weighing the pros and cons and doing the cost benefit analysis. And particularly when it comes to a large financial commitment, you would say, oh my goodness, it's all about a very rational approach. But the truth of the matter is, People make decisions for emotional reasons, and then they later justify those decisions with rational reasons. So what that says to us when marketing sales is we need both. We need both of those components. We need the rational reasons and the emotional reasons. There's a researcher named Antonio Damasio, and he studied humans who had sustained injury to the parts of their brain that control emotion. And he found that they were virtually incapable of making a decision. Debbie, even a decision as simple as, what would you like for lunch today? They couldn't decide. They'd go around and around, back and forth. And what he proved was that humans need to tap into that emotional part of their brain in order to make decisions. So what that means to us is, even though we want to have all the rational reasons there, we also want to make that emotional connection. We want to almost lead with the emotion, factor in that emotion, but then also have the rational reason. So you want that combination of both. And so often, particularly for a high ticket purchase, particularly for a considered purchase, we think the emotion is pushed off to the side. It's all about the facts and the figures and the speeds and the feeds. And that's not entirely true. And when marketers ignore emotion, we end up leaving money on the table.
I think when we think about marketing and senior living, it is very like, let me tell you all about the community, all the reasons why you should move in. What is our better and different story? We have blogs, we have guides, we have ebooks, we have infographics. But how do we, before we have a human interaction, because so many people are marketing qualified leads and they're not yet engaging with our wonderful, warm, and engaging sales team, how do we infuse emotion into marketing before we have that human connection?
Yeah, now that's a great question, because we can think about, all right, when I'm in front of somebody, I'll make that emotional connection, and they'll see it in my body language and in my face and my smile and my eyes, and when I'll lightly touch them on the arm, or whatever it is, I'll make that emotional connection, and those are all great. But you're right, before you can even get that opportunity, we're forced to communicate via a screen or a piece of paper, and so how do we do that? But part of it is, I think, the words that we use. So instead of just launching into our sales pitch, like here's what you should know about us, here's why we're different, here's why people choose us, back it up a little bit and maybe just set the stage or the groundwork and acknowledge how somebody might be feeling. This is likely a tough decision for you. You probably have a lot on your mind. You're weighing a number of different factors as you try to make this decision. You're wondering if it's the right time. You're wondering where the right place is. You're wondering how your loved one is going to feel about this, whatever it is. But identify with them and say, look, in a very empathetic way, I imagine you're feeling a lot of these feelings, or we know that you're feeling these feelings, or many of our customers, our clients have told us this before they became residents or before their loved one became a resident. But when you start to make that connection, when people say, oh my gosh, they really understand the world I'm living in right now, it really helps. It forms that emotional connection. And when the emotional connection is formed, people begin to trust you more. And when people begin to trust you more, they're more open to your story. They're going to absorb what you have to say. They're more likely to believe you. And at the end of the day, probably more likely to do business with you. The old adage is people do business with people they like and trust, right? So
Yeah.
by acknowledging how somebody is feeling, by putting that out there, by putting it up front, it starts to build that rapport, even though you're not face to face.
Yeah, that's really interesting because when I look at senior living websites, right, and 83% or 90% of people are on your website before they make that kind of human interaction, call, schedule a tour. Most of the language it is factual, right? How far can you go, like in terms of just playfulness or honesty? Is it okay to have a message, and maybe a website isn't the most appropriate place, maybe it's too high up in the funnel, but where you can really try to connect with people, like not sleeping? We get it. It's hard. And here are the problems that we typically solve for people who are looking into senior living. Do you feel like there's an opportunity almost to disrupt and not feel like, oh, the most caring senior housing will take great care of your parents and loved one? Everybody's got, right? We're the best community. We have the best staff. We provide the best care. We're not task focused. We're resident focused. It's personalized care. And so when you start looking at these websites, pretty much it seems very commoditized. We have meals and transportation and activities, and so does everybody else. So is there, from a marketing perspective, kind of an opportunity to disrupt and say something bold? Want to be mom's favorite? Choose our community. Because emotionally, every child wants to be their parent's favorite. Like, how do we connect emotionally, and where do you think those boundaries are?
Sure. No, I think you brought up some really good points. I do believe that the websites pretty much are very similar. They're all saying the same things. Who's going to say, look, we don't take care of your loved one. We're not going to feed them.
Right.
Who's going to say, well, we're the uncaring option? No, nobody's going to say that. They're all going to say that they're caring. They're all going to say we have these great activities. And so it's okay. And that's fine. You don't want to not say that. If you don't say that, people are going to think you don't have it. So of course you have to say it. But imagine you're the person who's doing the searching. You're looking at website after website. They all start to look like wallpaper. And then you find the one that says not sleeping. And you're like, oh my gosh, yes, yes. Or don't want your mother to hate you, right? Yes. And so it does help you differentiate yourself. It does stand out. It does make that emotional connection. So yes, you have to have all of the other stuff, but that opportunity to say something in a different way, instead of just saying we care, show it, demonstrate it, show that you care, show that you understand what your prospective resident or resident's family is going through, and use honest, authentic, real language. Use the language that you hear them use when you actually talk to them. Play that back. If you're hearing people say, look, I'm afraid my mother's going to hate me when I do this, or it's breaking my heart to make this decision, use
Yeah.
that language, because it's real, it's authentic, it's where they are, and they're going to say, oh my gosh, you guys understand me, and you get that bond. And of course we're talking about language, and all of these things are going to help you connect better, and they're going to help you stand out. The other half of that, even as we talk about emotions, is the imagery that you use. And so of course we're going to have pictures of happy people. That makes sense. That's what people want to see. But there are certain things that we can do. We want to have people making eye contact, or we want to use eye gaze to direct people to the information we want them to read. We want to show moments of joy. And the reason we want to do that is there's something called mirror neurons. When we as people see somebody else do something, our brain fires as if we ourselves are doing it. If you're practicing your golf swing, when they're telling you to imagine the perfect swing or the perfect tennis serve, when you're seeing it in your mind, when your brain is firing as if you're doing it, the same thing happens when you're looking at a picture. And if you see people having a good time, you're going to start to experience that almost by osmosis. You start to feel like, so if people look happy, if they look cared for, if it looks like there's some emotion in the photos, that also helps. And there's an interesting technique with before and after photos, where if you have, here was mom home alone, not happy because there was no one to socialize with, and now here she is in this new community with all of these friends. The closer you put those two photos together, that kind of before and after shot, the stronger the message is, the more believable it is, the more the tighter people believe the relationship is, and as a result, the more accurate they think the emotion or the information being conveyed is. So there are things we can do visually too that just infuse emotion into the messages that we're putting out there.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that, because we're just coming out with a new campaign for a client, which really does exactly that. They're a large provider, and they have thousands of prospects that are stuck in the post tour. So they're a sales qualified lead. They've had that warm interaction with the sales team. They've come for a tour. They've visited at least once to the community, and then they just go dark. They just go silent. They get scared. Something changes, and no, they're just not responding to any outreach. And so we've decided to do a very visual approach to re-engaging them. And internally, we're calling it the "What Are You Waiting For" campaign. Because we know, especially with assisted living and memory care, things aren't getting better either for the resident, prospective resident, or the family member. The longer they wait, the more social isolation, the more depression, the more unsafe situations that people are in, the more exhaustion, the more guilt, the more everything. Today is always better than tomorrow in terms of moving somebody in who needs that level of care. So we've come up with a campaign that kind of, and thanks to AI for helping us create these images that are not available in Shutterstock, right? So we'll show, for instance, to reinforce dining, an older adult sitting by themselves with a can of soup, versus this beautiful salmon over a beautiful fresh salad. So it's like processed food versus beautiful fresh dining with friends.
With
And the
friends,
next campaign is like somebody with a laundry basket going downstairs. I think it's like wash, rinse, repeat is the name of the headline, versus a caregiver handing beautifully folded laundry to the resident through the door. And so we've taken all of the kind of positive touch points of community living and then really done a comparison between what life is like at home and what it could be. Do you think that type of a campaign, there's not a lot of words, there's a very small amount of text, is a good approach?
Yeah, I think it is because in the back of their minds, the target audience knows this decision is coming, right? That's why they took the tour. That's why they had the initial outreach. And now they're stuck, right? As you said, what are you waiting for? But something is holding them back. Maybe they're like, oh, maybe things aren't so bad. Maybe there was a trigger event that was like, I got to look into this. Maybe mom fell, maybe, I don't know, whatever. And then, I don't know, things got a little bit better. And so people maybe get, so you want to shake them out of that because as you're right, as you say, rather, you're absolutely right. It's not going to get any better. People, I could wait, I can put it off. And so you're forcing them to almost reframe this. And it's like, all right, you think maybe you're doing the right thing by putting off the decision, but look at these two pictures. Here's where you are. Here's where things could be. And then when you think about it, it's like, why not do this now when your loved one can take the most advantage of it? Right? If you keep putting it off and putting it off and putting it off, there's going to come a point where the fact that you can have lovely food with people surrounding you is going to be less meaningful because the cognitive or health decline is so advanced at that point that they can't even enjoy it. Now they can. So
Right.
do it now while somebody can really. So I like that approach. It's shaking them up. It's here's what's going on. Here's how it could be. Are
Yeah.
you really doing the right thing by dragging your feet?
Yeah.
Not necessarily. And then, as we were saying earlier, with the idea of emotion, even just a little bit of empathy, it's tough to make the decision, but are you really doing anyone any favors by waiting, but acknowledging, look, it is tough to make the decision, or maybe you think things are going to get better, but is this really better, right? Or is this better? So yeah, I think that can be a very effective campaign.
Yeah. I'll let you know.
Yeah, please do.
Is it different, Nancy? We've been talking a lot about needs driven marketing, more the assisted living and memory care. When you're really selling something more compelling and more aspirational, 55 plus, active adult, Margaritaville doesn't seem to have any trouble building a 10,000 person waiting list because they've created this very compelling lifestyle. Like you're a parrot head, or who doesn't want it to be margaritas at 5 or cheeseburger in paradise every day. But if you're an independent living or active adult or 55 plus operator, does the messaging change? It still needs to be emotional, but it's less moving away from pain and solving that problem that people are having and really showing them the future of throwing away the honeydew list. And what would you do with fewer chores and more time? And how do you see that being different? Or is it?
Yeah, no, I think it is different because, as you say, you're solving different problems. One is maybe a pain point, and it's a difficult one because maybe you're not making the decision for yourself, you're making it for somebody else, and that can be different or make it harder. I think when you're making the decision for yourself and you're maybe doing it from a place of strength, like you don't, there wasn't some precipitating event that meant you had to make this decision right away or very quickly, but you're thinking, all right, what do I want the next 10, 15, 20 years of my life to be like? Yeah, and maybe there's something to, I've earned this, I've worked hard all my life, and now I've gotten to the place where I don't have to have that honey-do list. I don't have to be mowing the lawn. I don't have to be dealing with the repairs. I can enjoy myself. If I want to have a margarita at 5 every day and have it served to me, I can do that. Like I've gotten to that point in my life. And so I think it's moving towards something versus moving away from something, moving towards the pleasure, away from the pain. So I think that's really key. But even then, there are probably certain buying barriers. Should I really spend the money? Do I really need to do this? And is this really right for me? Is it the right lifestyle? Is it too indulgent? Like, what are people going to say if I do? So there are all of those things I think that a marketer would have to factor in when they're creating their marketing materials for an experience like that, for a product like that. You still need to think about, all right, why might somebody not want to do what I want them to do? And what can I say to overcome that barrier? A lot of times in marketing and sales, we're all about why someone should do something. And there's nothing wrong with that. Obviously, we do want to talk about why you should do this, why it would be good for you, the benefits and advantages that you'll get from it. But sometimes we need to think about why might someone not want to do what I'm asking them to do? And what's the smartest thing I can say to overcome that hurdle or that barrier. And to your earlier point, when we're face to face, we can see if someone looks a little puzzled or they're a little skeptical, or they themselves can say, hey, look, Debbie, I have a question. But when we're not face to face, when we're dealing with the screens and the papers, we're sending out direct mail or creating our websites or our emails, we as the marketing people need to think ahead and say, what is that thing that might hold somebody back? Are they thinking it's too much money? Are they thinking that we're painting one kind of a picture, but when they get here, it'll be a very different kind of a picture. What is it that's holding them back? And now what can we do to convince them that that really shouldn't be holding them back? And I think that's smart for every marketer to consider.
I love that idea of all the reasons not to. What are the barriers? And so, from just a structure of a marketing campaign, if you were going to put that together and you've written out the 6 or 10 reasons why, these are the objections we typically have to overcome to get somebody through their decision journey. Would you recommend really an integrated campaign where you take those series of messages and really apply them through social media, through web, through whether it's Google Ads or direct mail? And how long should you reinforce a message? Because so often we have clients that are like, I want to send out one direct mail. And I'm like, one? You want to send out one to one list? Like,
Yeah.
they have to hear your message more than once. Maybe you could do some unpaid consulting here and tell us if you're making a marketing strategy and a marketing plan and you've created all of these reasons why somebody wouldn't, and maybe you're going to apply that to people who are stuck in your funnel, that maybe you just have to help them work through some of these barriers. How long would a typical campaign like that last? And what kind of channels would you recommend to be included in that type of a campaign?
Yeah, that's a really good question because I think we would all love to be able to send out one email or one direct mail piece or one social post and be like, one and done. It's perfect. We got all the business we need. It would be great, but it doesn't really work that way. And we know it doesn't work that way from experience. And we also know why it doesn't work that way. People aren't always focused on our message. Even when they do happen to engage with it, their attention spans are short. They're being drawn in a lot of different directions. So there are a lot of studies that show you need 7 or 8 exposures just to get through. Now, I'm not even talking about getting the decision made. I'm just saying getting the message through. Like you just need to you need to get it in front of somebody many times. And just because we sent out an email or put up a social post, it doesn't mean that somebody's seen it. Or sometimes it registers as seen, but it wasn't really consumed. We have to be careful about that. Search may be a little bit different because they're actively trying to find you. How much time are they spending? They're quickly going through things. We need the more repeated exposures. Like a one-hit thing is not going to necessarily give you all the business you want. In theory, if you have a direct response focused campaign, you should get some response, of course. That's
Right.
the idea. It's brand building changes attitude and awareness over time, and direct response changes action in the moment, but you're only going to get a certain amount. You need to keep building on it. And the old adage is you, as the marketer, are going to get sick of the campaign before your target audience will. You're going to be spending so much time with it. You're going to be looking at it. You're going to be running it and rerunning it that you're like, oh my gosh, it's time for a new one. We should freshen things up way before your audience because your audience just isn't spending that much time with it. They're not engaging with it. If you have a really good, solid campaign, you can run it for several months, 6 months, depending on your frequency. You can push it out for a year even, again, depending on your frequency. I have spoken to a guy named Jay Schwedelson from
Mhm.
Outcome Media, I think.
Oh, he's amazing.
He is absolutely amazing. And what he'll say, he has subjectline.com and Google
Yeah.
Conference, and he was one I did the Hot Wing Challenge with. But he will say that a lot of people get nervous about emails and they feel that they're way over emailing, that they're approaching like stalker or spam, like they're just constantly emailing. And so they hold back. And his research has shown that very often we as the marketer pull back way before we should. And he's got statistics that show that doubling up, tripling, like you can, if you send 2 or 3 e-messages and email messages in the same week, you do better than just doing one. And we might say one a week that's appropriate. That's not being too intrusive. And yet he's got the data that shows that no, you can double and triple that and still be in a better place and get better response. I think the name of the game is frequency, just being there, over and over again. And then you're asking about where, and I think we need to be where our prospect is. So if it's on social media, if it's on certain blogs or websites, if maybe we have email or direct mail access to them, but we need to be where they're going to be. And we want to have that same message being reinforced. And I'm not saying we take the social media post and we put a stamp on it and send it in the mail. We want to use the best practices for each channel, of course, but the theme should be consistent. If we're talking, if we know what the biggest barriers are and we're overcoming them in a certain way, we want that message to be consistent, regardless of where people encounter it. And we want them to encounter it several times before it finally is going to sink in and get the needed action.
And the thing is, everything is measurable. That's both the beauty and the devil of today's marketing, right? Because there's just full transparency. Like you can see which emails they're opening. You can A/B test headlines and realize, oh, this headline is better than that. This photo performs better than that. A landing page design can impact conversion. And so you really need to work with a marketing company that's doing that kind of testing and due diligence. But there's really nowhere to hide in today's marketing. You can see along a workflow, where are people engaging, where are they disengaging, where are they unsubscribing. And I know we had a journey that 5 years ago was a 4-step journey, 3 years ago was an 8-step journey, and today is a 15-step journey. And with each of those journeys, there's actually less text and more visual.
No, but you're absolutely right. You can put the messages out there and then you can see where they fall off, it's like the point of diminishing return, where it's not worth it to spend to get it out there because you're not getting the return. But 4, 8, 15, you push it out until you're like, okay, here's where the fall off or the drop off point is. And to your point, if you're willing to put in the time and effort, or if you have a smart agency that will do this for you, that operates that way, you can find out so much exactly what's performing, how it's performing, what's performing better than the other thing. And you can make those adjustments along the way to continually optimize your message so that you're getting the best ROI that you can. You're wringing as much out of it as possible.
You can't set it and forget it, Nancy.
You can't. No, it's very tempting to think that you can, but if you're really trying to optimize your marketing and you want to stay in the business, you really can't set it and forget it.
I want to explore 2 more topics that you brought up in your SMASH session that I was so fascinated by from a neuroscience perspective. The first one is the prospect's self-perception. And I know you had talked about people who perceive that we used to do persona development, right? We always had best of the best Bob and Betty versus affordable Andrew and Ann, right? And so the marketing messages that they're going to respond to are very different. And each of our clients, like we have clients that have very luxury brands. And so those types of folks are going to resonate with a different type of message than somebody who has a more affordable mid-market brand. So I'd love for you to talk about really understanding kind of your persona and your buyer and how that influences that emotional messaging in terms of how they perceive themselves. Of course, I want the best value versus, of course, I want the best of the best. And then the second one is urgency, how we can leverage and create campaigns of urgency, because I was so fascinated with both of those slides you put up there.
Sure. So all right, I'll take the self-image one first. I'll do them in the order that you mentioned. And yeah, it's interesting. We as consumers, as people, we form lifelong relationships with brands that we feel reflect who we are. So if we see something in a brand that seems like, yeah, they share my values, we have the same perspective on things, we connect with that brand. And it's very hard to break that bond. It's why people wear logoed merchandise. People will only drink Starbucks or only drink Dunkin' Donuts. We identify with a particular brand, and that's how we are. There's almost like the us them mentality. You're an Apple person, not a IBM person. You're a Democrat, not a Republican. You're a Coke person, not a Pepsi person. But we choose brands that reflect who we are or who we want to be seen as. Like this brand reflects who I'd like to be perceived as, or this brand matches who I see myself as. And so if you see yourself as somebody who's ultra luxury, okay, that's one way to go. If you see yourself as someone who's a shrewd money manager and very savvy, if you see yourself as a New England Yankee, I don't know, like you have a different perception of yourself, a different headset, and different messages are going to resonate with you. And as a result, different brands are going to connect with you. So I think it's important to know who you're marketing to. And that's not to say that, you might not have a couple of different personas that could find your product or your service attractive, but knowing who you're talking to and knowing how to serve up the messages is really important. Because if people get this like sense, this gut feeling that no, they're not for me, you could talk until you're blue in the face, but there's that gut feeling, right? They're not for me. So understanding that is very important. And then urgency, yeah, that's one half of the scarcity principle, right? So what behavioral scientists have found is people overvalue things that are scarce or difficult to get, right? If something is widely available, we think we have plenty of time to take advantage of it. If we really want it right now, we grab it right now. If not, we don't. But when people find out that something is only available for a certain amount of time, or it's only available to a certain group of people, that can change everything. It's like a switch flips in us and it makes us want it and want it badly. Like we want what we can't have. And that can even take somebody who was neutral to slightly negative about something. And when they find out that only certain people can have it, all of a sudden they become very positive about it. I want that thing. I want to get mine before they're all gone. I want to be part of the group that's the in group that can have this. Anytime that we can use urgency, it can help speed up the buying process or move along the buying process. It could be something as simple as, look, there are only so many corner units. We just have one that's become available, or there are only so many suites. Here we have, or the pre-construction pricing is only going to last for a certain amount of time. But anytime that we can add some kind of urgency, and I'm not suggesting that we manufacture it because then we'll erode trust. You can't say that we're having this sale this week only, and then next week, oops, we're having this sale this week only,
Yeah.
and then the third week, oh, we're having this sale this week. Then people they start thinking I can't trust this person. But if you legitimately have some kind of urgency, whether it's a finite number of properties, whether it's a limited promotion for the price, whether you're giving special considerations to someone because they're a member of a particular group, maybe you go to the Newton Senior Center and you say, hey, look, we've got a new building, that new community that we're developing, and anybody who's a member of the Newton Senior Center will get this special upgrade if you come in by a certain time. It's like people feel, I was so smart because I'm a member of the Newton Senior Center and I get this deal that my neighbor down the street who never wanted to join the senior center, my neighbor's not going to get that deal. So anything that we can do to offer someone something that's limited in some way to a group that they belong to, who they are, some smart decision they made, or that's limited in terms of time or quantity, that's the kind of thing that can get someone off the dime and make them act now when maybe they were delaying it or maybe thinking they weren't even going to. But when we find out that not everyone can have something, we want it. It's human nature.
Is. Boy, we are just biologically wired, aren't we?
And we definitely are. Yet it goes way back to our ancient ancestors where we had to survive, right? And if there were limited resources, if you didn't get some of those limited resources, you were very likely not going to be one of the ones who survived. So the ones that got the resources were the ones that survived. They passed down their genes. And all of these years later, we may not be hunting and gathering or foraging or whatever, but we respond to, if it's limited, I want to have it. It's hardwired into who we are.
Yeah, we were working with the client and they just opened not too long ago. And so I was talking about urgency and they're like, Debbie, how can we create urgency? We're only 30% occupied, 70% of our units are available. But I'm like, but you only have two on the first floor and you only have your 80% occupied in memory care and not all of your units overlook the golf course.
Right.
So I think you have to be creative around urgency. And on the flip side, I'm very troubled when I get onto a website and the first thing that pops up is waive your community 3 months free. Like I just visited the website. Like when is it appropriate to create pricing urgency? I just feel like it shouldn't be in your face of a website visitor. It may be the first experience of your brand. And to me, it just looks desperate. Like they're going to give me 3 months free. How good could that be? Is there any neuroscience behind incentives and offers being just incongruous to where somebody is in their decision process?
Yeah, it's a good question. We talk about free, right? And the power of free, and it's a very powerful word, right? If you use free in a subject line, you get twice as many opens as the word complimentary, and they both mean the same thing, right? But there's something
Mhm.
about free. Dan Ariely, who's a world famous behavioral economist, he wrote the book Predictably Irrational. He has an entire chapter in that book about the pulling power of the word free, and he says we have such an emotional response to it that we just overvalue things that are free. So we know that free works, but we also know that if we give too much for free, or if we give free too soon, people wonder how good can it be, right? You get what you pay for, right? So it's that delicate balance. So free can be very motivating to get someone interested, get their attention. It can be very motivated to get them to take the next step. So if you're just in the initial shopping stages and you're just bouncing from site to site, trying to put together your short list, I don't know if that's the most appropriate time, right? But now
Yeah.
if you've come back a couple of times and now I'm on the consideration list and I'm trying to decide, then sweetening the deal to speed up the action could make a lot of sense. The other thing we can think about is, what are we going to be offering for free? Is it going to be 3 months free, or is it going to be a free item or a free upgrade with purchase, which is maybe a little bit different? So I think free can be a very strategic tool, but we have to be thoughtful about how and when we deploy it. And when maybe not everyone who walks in the door gets it, but people who are better qualified, who look like, all right, they're further in the purchase funnel, but they need a little something to push them our way, then it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it makes sense if you're a sales qualified lead that's already been in for a visit, already connected to the sales team, and you're just trying to control the timing. Like right now, it's the end of the year, right? We're talking in December. And so we are running rate lock kind of programs. Lock in your 2023 rates. They are going up in 2024. That is real. You don't have to physically move in, but you just need to sign an agreement by the end of the month because a lot of people don't want to physically move over the holidays. It can be really effective because you could save 5%, 7% of that next year's. But I think you have to do it in a way that's really appropriate. To your point, you can program websites so that pop-up only shows up to people who are return visitors.
Exactly.
Not first-time visitors where they might be taken aback and it is going to be incongruous to them.
Yeah, and
Well,
I want to circle back to one other point you made about we're only 30% full, like what, but there's another thing we can do with social proof. And if you say, well, we're percent full, that could backfire on you because someone goes, that means you're 70% empty, so people aren't
right.
choosing you. But you can talk about when the numbers aren't in the majority, right? You can talk about the trend. We've seen a month over month growth of X, and that signals to people, oh, more and more people are doing this. So if you're looking at a lower number that's not going to do what you need it to do right away, you can talk about the trend. And if there's a month by month trend, suddenly people are like, oh, I see where this is going and I want to get in on it. So that's another way to look at it. So in addition to only having so many rooms on the first floor and so many rooms overlooking the golf course, there's also this other thing we can do with social proof, which I thought was pretty interesting. I recently learned about it and I'm like, that's something that's very useful for marketers.
It really is. And I have to ask you, is your behavioral science research responsible for the fact that I go onto a website and it says 23 people have bought this item or 100 people have booked this hotel room? There must be a neuroscience to scarcity, to urgency, and to following, right? That's built in, or it must be effective.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with social proof, which is the idea of I'm not really sure what to do. So I look to others like me and I follow their lead, right? If 100 people have already booked this place, I guess it must be good because it's people like me who are looking to travel to the city and are looking at the hotels in the city, right? If you're on a travel website. But yeah, there's something very powerful about social proof. Two things happen. We're not really sure what to do. We look at all those people, we see they're doing something, we assume they know something we don't. Now, they could be just as lost and confused and uncertain as we are, but we don't think that. We think they know something we don't. So if a bunch of people are doing something, we think, all right, they know something that I don't. So I'm going to follow them because so many people are doing it. It must be safe. I'm probably not going to get disappointed. I'm probably going to feel good about my decision. We also feel that if we don't do it, we're going to be left out. We're going to be missing out on something that's really good. So when you see all these people doing something, part of it is urgency. You think, oh my gosh, there's only going to be so many left. But part of it is so many people are doing things that maybe I should get in on it too. It's a safe bet. I doubt that I'll be disappointed and I'm not going to miss out. And so that's why social proof can be such a powerful pull. And so that's if you only have 30%, you can say 30% are now choosing this community. And it's, oh, all right,
Yeah.
growing trend. I got to get in on it. If you're 95% full, then you say, we're 95% full. And still people will say, oh, wow, there's only 5% left. I better get in. A lot of people are choosing this. So you can make it work in both cases, depending on what your numbers are. But there's a way to still deploy that sales psychology.
Oh, so interesting. I encourage everybody to go and get Nancy's book because trust me, we have only barely scraped the surface of all of the incredible insights, and the power of behavioral science and marketing is just fascinating. So go get the book. Nancy, tell everybody how they can get hold of you and how they can get your book.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, so the book is Using Behavioral Science and Marketing, Drive Customer Action and Loyalty by Prompting Instinctive Responses. And it's 288 pages, 17 chapters, and over 25 of my proven go-to behavioral science principles. They're not my principles, but I use them with my clients, and I have found that they work in the marketplace. So the ones that I keep returning to over and over again. There are hundreds out there, but these 25 have worked for many of my clients in many different industries. So check out the book. It's available at Kogan Page, the publisher. It's on Amazon, at Barnes & Noble, Target. You can find it anywhere. And you can find me on Twitter, X, LinkedIn, Facebook, and at hbtmarketing.com, hbtmktg.com. We have a lot of thought leadership up there. So there are papers and interviews and articles that people can listen to if they want to find out more about behavioral science. And I would love to hear from your listeners.
That'd be great. We'll put all of that into the show notes, and I hope lots of people reach out and go buy that book. And Nancy, thank you so much for stopping by and sharing your senior living marketing perspectives with us.
Debbie, thank you. It's been a complete pleasure. I really enjoyed chatting with you.